brands are being a lot more intentional with the products that they're putting out towards consumers, but they're being very intentional about the dollars that they're putting behind the creators to promote these brands. So that's something that I think is a lot of people are struggling with, especially creators that I've signed, that were doing a lot of business. Like I said, in the COVID era, they're finding that, going viral for something is not like the key to internet success like it was, back then. So it's not just about going viral, it's about creating content that educates people or brings them into a
Mhm.
circle of the world that they don't have access to.
This is the Wine and Dine Me podcast. Forget the etiquette. No rules, just real talk. On today's podcast, I have Lauren Taylor. Lauren is the founder of LeFleur Society, a high-touch agency representing creators, celebrities, and public figures, and her path into the creator economy is anything but conventional. With a background in law and experience building her own firm, Lauren brings a rare combination of legal insight, brand strategy, and entrepreneurial instinct to the world of talent representation. Rather than approaching the creator space as simply a place for visibility or brand deals, she has built a company rooted in protection, alignment, and long term value. Through LeFleur Society, Lauren works with talent as business owners, helping them navigate partnerships, protect their personal brands, and build careers that extend beyond a single campaign or social media moment. Today's conversation will explore what influence means now, why authenticity still matters, and how creative entrepreneurs can differentiate in a crowded market, and why the strongest personal brands are built with clarity, trust, and real business structure. Lauren is special to me because she started as a client of mine. I had the privilege of planning a really fun party for her law firm. And now I'm a client of hers. So, full circle moment. And thank you for being with me today.
Oh, of course. I'm so excited. I love you, Reagan. So I can't wait to dig in.
Well, let's talk about your newest venture, LeFleur Society. How did you go from law to launching LeFleur Society?
So, it's a really funny story. So, I've had the law firm since 2012, and we actually practiced all throughout the state of South Carolina. We have offices in Greenville as well as Daniel Island here in Charleston. And I loved it. It gave me so much like fulfillment. But I started around COVID to start thinking of, some other things that I really still wanted to accomplish. I'm turning 40 this year. So, the law firm gave me such an amazing like place to really hone a lot of my skills as far as an entrepreneur as well as just a businesswoman. So when LaFleur kind of came out of some conversations I was having with some very dear friends who were involved in the industry, and it just became apparent that there were some pretty big gaps that were being left open by current managers, current people in the marketing field, and branding. So after talking with a few really good friends and people that, respected what I was able to do from a marketing standpoint with the law firm, they encouraged me, to take that set of skills and really try to start something new and different and fix a lot of the issues that people are finding, not only with, talent management, but also in marketing companies in general. So I was able to take, my legal hat with my marketing brain and kind of fuse those together, and I kind of get teased by my girls sometimes that they call me like the Southern Kris Jenner because I try to really take that momager approach, not just with clients, but also, with talent as well. I think that's something that I've been able to do that really sets me apart from my competitors in this industry.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Having that legal background is so important because, I mean, me as a creator, so many creatives this sounds obvious, but creative and not so business, rooted, and they don't protect themselves like they should. And so, what do you see creative entrepreneurs often misunderstanding about their own value?
So I think that, like you and I talked about, like when you're an entrepreneur, especially if you happen to be a female entrepreneur, there's a million things that are coming down the pipeline every single day from, like the accounting side of your business to the HR side, and then actually, producing the product, which in your case is, a beautifully curated event. So a lot of people get lost in the sauce when it comes to marketing and really creating a brand that is going to last, outlive you, live a legacy that you can create. And so, what I wanted to do was take that plate or take that piece off of the plate of a lot of entrepreneurs and do it intentionally. So, I think a lot of people know that social media is something that they need to make a part of their business, but they get paralyzed with, trends and things that they see other creators doing, and they know they need to be posting, but they get a little diluted in the mass of, information and our attention spans that are rapidly decreasing day to day. So I think one of the most important things is to stop and not necessarily look at what other people are doing in your area or other creators in general, but to really start to dial back into what makes you uniquely you. That is the trend that we're seeing a lot of, people struggling with, that were maybe really successful in that influencer age that was like popping off right during COVID and afterwards, where, people were really making hand over fist in that industry. People are getting smarter. They know what is an ad, they know what's being sold to them. So the consumers are not absorbing that content like they once were. And that's translating to brands getting smarter about where they put their ad dollars. So when you're thinking about a brand and a business, you want to make sure that you're one of the things that is trending right now and that you and I have talked about, Reagan, is really telling that founder story. A lot of people are just hawking something that isn't theirs or they have no, rooted interest in, but telling that creative story of like, who is Reagan? What does a day in Reagan's life look like? What are some of the issues that pop up, whether it's an unhappy client or a client or an employee that is causing, a disruption in how the business is working. They want to know those stories because that creates that real authenticity. And then they want to follow along in your journey because that trust has been created.
Ah,
I think that's the most important thing
yes.
for people to focus on today.
That's so interesting, and it's really hard because, I would say, authenticity has kind of been a buzzword for the last, I don't know, a while now, but almost to the point that authenticity is now feeling scripted, right?
Yeah.
And so what does authenticity mean now and look like now?
So I think it's different for every person, right? When I was starting the law firm and really, digging into social media, I was one of the first lawyers to create an Instagram page. And, a lot of people were like, oh, she just wants to post pretty pictures of herself. And that's the image she's creating. Well, what I was really doing is creating this life that people don't know, right? I don't necessarily, or at the time, I wasn't posting, me in my bed or me with my dogs. I was posting this very professional looking version that I wanted to showcase to the world. Now, that was authentic in the sense that, yeah, there's a part of my personality that, got dressed up, went to court, and did that boss thing. But then there was another whole side of me that I was kind of guarding and keeping to myself from the world. So I think that's, you don't have to share and bear every horrible or amazing thing that happens to you in your life to be authentic. I think it's just coming up with the version of you that you want the world to see and absorb and connect with. And that doesn't necessarily mean bearing every intimate detail, but it does mean, what you choose to share, you're talking about it from a place that is truthful and that people can read the difference. I almost think authenticity is something that is felt better than it is described. You get that feeling when you're talking to your best friend on the other side of the phone. And that's what some of these really good creators are doing. They're moving from more polished content like what I was producing, 5 or 6 years ago on Instagram to much more, not necessarily unpolished or messy, but just a little bit more real, a little bit more gritty, a little bit more, able to relate to the average person who maybe, isn't sitting in glam every day before they go about their work day. So I think that's something that is
Right.
is coming through in that authenticity, but it's changing the type of content that we're absorbing and we're connecting with.
Can you be a luxury brand and still show unpolished? How does that work without taking away from the luxury nature of your brand?
So I don't ever want to use the word unpolished because I think there's a way to do things well, but it might not be this full scale production, right? Something that I think you're seeing a lot of luxury brands do. I don't know if you've seen this, but there's like InStyle is doing the intern series where this is like they're
Oh,
acting
no.
out these little skits and they're using their employees and their interns to create these really cool, funny stories that probably do happen with a female office where you're writing a magazine and they're talking about their nails chipping or being late for a meeting. So I think that's an example of how a brand is taking something that wouldn't necessarily be considered curated and polished content, but it's funny, it's interesting, and it's exciting. And that's a story that's being told throughout each, post. Another really good example, which might
Mhm.
be a little definitely more unpolished and a little more raunchy, shall we say, is Barstool Sports did something similar. They took all of their staff out to Vegas. They did kind of like a real world, for those of us who remember the old original reality television of Real World. They did a kind of situation like that where there weren't necessarily reality television cameras following them, but they were documenting everything that was happening and posting it as live stories to their feed. So there's so many different ways that you can get creative and still maybe stay inside of your niche. Like Barstool is still a very, male dominated avenue for people. It's a little grungy, it's a little, out there. They're going to offend some people. And then you've got InStyle, which is, traditionally much more curated and glossy and, consumed by women, but they're still doing something differently, but it's within that realm of what their base is, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, totally. What about the market being so oversaturated and everyone has their content, everybody has their Canva, everybody has their content calendar and point of view. And so it's so hard to stand out, but what differentiates a brand right now and what do brands need to know about standing out in today's market?
So I think what differentiates a brand right now is from a brand side, I think they're being a lot more particular about what products they're putting out into the marketplace, right? You're not seeing as many of those, like factor meals. You could see when one of those things is going on and all of your favorite influencers are doing a promo code or something like that. You're starting to see a lot less of that happening. So brands are being a lot more intentional with the products that they're putting out towards consumers, but they're being very intentional about the dollars that they're putting behind the creators to promote these brands. So that's something that I think is a lot of people are struggling with, especially creators that I've signed, that were doing a lot of business. Like I said, in the COVID era, they're finding that, going viral for something is not like the key to internet success like it was, back then. So it's not just about going viral, it's about creating content that educates people or brings them into a circle
Mhm.
of the world that they don't have access to. So, like an example would be you, obviously. A lot of people would love to know, like, the nitty gritty and the drama that goes on behind the scenes of planning, very high dollar weddings and stuff like that. And with me, there's a lot of creativity or interest about what goes on in making these deals and negotiating, usage rights and things like that that creators sometimes get really bogged down in and they sign these contracts. A lot of times, we call it like they're just trying to see what they can get away with. They'll send a contract that's extremely restrictive. Maybe it, prevents you from working with any other brand that might be in that space, whether it's health and beauty or fitness or something. but people don't read it. They just want
Mm.
the money or the deal. And so they sign it, and they're not realizing that they may have signed away their usage rights, exclusivity rights, and stuff that the brand can then use later for their own benefit without the creator necessarily getting that trickle down payment. So I think that's a new trend that people have to watch out for. But I want people to still create. I mean, we're still consuming content on socials in a new way, but I think the way brands and creators are really going to thrive in this new environment is that like episodic storytelling or series that get people interested and they keep coming back to follow. One of the ones that always gets me are like these, before and after of home renovations. Like if I've watched a sped up video of you doing your room, I'm coming back the next day because I want to see the finished product of what that is. So I think creative not just hooks with your words, but with how you're telling the story that brings someone back because they want to see what happens next or how you handled the next thing
Mhm.
that came on your plate.
So does it sounds like it's more you're essentially building a relationship with the consumer, and it sounds like consistency is really important right now.
Absolutely. And you can't jump around too much. So just because something might not have gotten amazing like views in one video, don't completely give up on the series. Maybe we tweak some things, maybe we post it at a different time, maybe we add, some different tags or hashtags to it. But it's important to like kind of see something through and see what you're getting traction wise. And then don't be afraid to pivot, but don't quit after just one, video or one shot and think, hey, no one's interested in this because the way the algorithm, pops up into people's feed, some people are going to see that content and love it. And then other people might not ever be seeing it at all. So it's something that you kind of have to, if you feel good about it and you're committed that this is the story I can tell that makes me different from everyone else, stick to it.
I wasn't planning to ask you this question, but it just popped into my mind. As a creative entrepreneur, and you can relate to this too, you have the business brand, right? But then you also have the personal brand. Do they go hand in hand?
Yes. So I always try to tell people I want you to think of like two ships that are going in the same direction, but they have like different crews. We want them to be rowing at the same time, but the content does need to be different. One mistake a lot of business owners make is that they sit down, they batch film content, and then they post the same thing on multiple platforms. That is the quickest way to just like waste all of your effort. What you're posting on Instagram needs to be a lot more curated. That's the visual storytelling. What we're posting on TikTok is more that you and your best friend talking about the gossip of the day or what interesting thing happened. And then YouTube is our longer format, if we want to walk through like your conception of an event from, the mock-ups to the final event. That's a longer form content. And then Substack is really something that I see being great for business owners like you and myself because it's a new modern day blog that also, has visuals in it, but people can really get into the information that you want to provide them. So it's a different medium, but you could take something like this podcast, for instance, and translate that over to Substack and have, a few more things in there. And that's a medium that is brands are really targeting because it's not a quick eye like an Instagram or a TikTok.
Mm,
Someone is really reading your content
mhm.
and they're absorbing it and they're spending more time on it than they would any other platform. So the people that can either hire someone like me to make sure that you're being, properly represented on all of those different things, that's what's going to be the boat and the oars rowing in the same direction to create the end result because we always want the founder to be recognized and appreciated for the work that has gone into this and like the ecosystem that they've built, the way they make their employees feel, how they foster relationships with not just their clients, but their communities and their competitors, even, and in your case, vendors, but also like how they make someone feel at the end of the day. I think that's a really important part of it as well.
I love how you have said that the most successful brands or businesses are those who are actively building an ecosystem, like you just said. So it's more than just posting a snippet on Instagram or TikTok. It's really the whole story. And you even just mentioned how you make your team feel. It's really interesting and that the consumer even cares, but it's important.
They really do because think of it like, I mean, Emma from Good American, she gets in the news a lot for some controversial things that she says. I believe like the one thing that always follows her is the fact that she made the comment she spends 3 hours a day, with her children. Well, a lot of people get riled up by that, that statement, and it gets a lot of people talking from women to men to mothers to non-mothers. But for me, when I look at it, I'm like, man, that was such a good PR move for her to say that because it doesn't matter whether you think she's a horrible mother or a genius entrepreneur, you're talking about her, right? And you're talking about what she's created and how she's doing it. So just because people don't agree with the ecosystem that you've built or your own ethos or philosophy doesn't mean that they don't respect it. It doesn't mean that they're not going to consume it. And it doesn't mean that they're not going to talk about it. So I think that's another thing is that we all want to live in this bubble of being liked and loved and praised and, told how amazing we are. But there's another area as well where you can take a path of a little bit more grit and you can just be as just successful, if not more. I mean, on a massive level, she's made the Kardashians even richer than they were originally. So
Yeah, exactly. Well, and also look at Spencer Pratt right now,
exactly.
perfect example.
And that's someone like
Crazy.
really, from our generation, if you were old enough to remember the original Spencer Pratt, who was, this reality television villain, he had this image that he really had to work hard to course correct because so many of us just have that in our brains associated with him. And he's done it in a way that is very much him, right? It grates on people's nerves. He's loud, he's angry, he's putting it in your face, but it's him and it's authentic to who he is. And I think, we're not just talking about business here. We're not just talking about brands. We're talking about the world and how people look at you. And if you can humanize yourself to them, like he's living in a trailer because his house burned down, like that's touching people, that's reaching them where they are and connecting with them. And that's what all of this is. That's life, that's branding, that's business, that's the meaning of it all. So those people that are that vulnerable and that can step out into the world and not be afraid to be disliked or to be criticized, those are also their own little authentic bubbles that people respect.
I love that. That's so cool. Well, let's talk about entrepreneurs almost replacing influencers or if you think so because right now there's a shift. An influencer was very much the person who just like popped on and had a promo and blah 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 and now you're seeing more founders and operators and stylists and attorneys. Um do you think the entrepreneur is replacing the influencer?
I do, honestly. And I really work with my influencer clients that maybe haven't reached out of that box yet to start thinking about like, okay, what do I want my, lasting impression or legacy to be? Do I want it to be a product that's mine or do I want to be known for, doing UGC content or doing beautiful beauty content? I think that the ones that are going to succeed are the ones that make that intentional pivot, whether it's even just partnering with a brand to do a collaboration that is their names on it, or they really are, working with someone like LeFleur who can take, a concept of an idea, get it all the way through to production, and then help you with the branding of it, the building of the website, and what the message is to the consumer. So yeah, I think that the people that are pivoting, thinking outside the box and changing the way that they're communicating with their audience are the ones that are going to be successful in this next thing. And they're not just going to be successful in the influencer category. They're building these brands and these audiences that want to buy whatever they're putting their name on or whatever they're creating. So it's
Mhm.
that loyalty. And that can come from reality stars, that are doing that to, internet stars, YouTube stars. We've even got, a lot of celebrities or actresses that, Hollywood isn't filming as many movies as it used to. It's doing a lot more Marvel things. So we've got actresses that are coming into this field as well. So I would say the traditional influencer that has nothing else to offer the world but their opinion on products is going to be the first on the chopping block. You've got to diversify what you're offering and it can't just be beautiful content.
Do you think entrepreneurs should think less about follower count and more about credibility? Is that shifting as well?
Absolutely. I feel like follower count is dead. First of all, you have tons of people that buy fake followers. You have, unfortunately, a lot of, marketing agencies out there that was actually a strategy that they implemented, for a while. So what that's causing is Instagram knows that they know when you're using bots to comment and engage. So they flag your account. And then once that happens, you get shadow banned and you're climbing out of a hole and you're losing, any reach you might have had with somebody that was a direct follow. So I definitely think that that's something you're going to see changing as we get, more and more into the new world of socials.
Speaking of searchability, let's talk about Google SEO being searchable. So, how does SEO fit into personal branding now?
So SEO has come so far from where it originally started. So I started doing, and just for anyone that might not understand, SEO is short for search engine optimization. This really got started like in the 2000s when Google started rolling out their search engine. And what it would do essentially is, in its original form, businesses could pay Google to appear on that first page. This was before now, where you can very clearly see what are ads and what pops up in the location services. So businesses would pay and they would allot a certain amount of a budget towards that. And then Google would go back and do their genius computing skills. And they would say, I'll give you an example for divorce law when I did it. It was about $47 a click. So every person that would click on my link, it would take $47 out of my Google, spend account. Well, what you started having happening there was a lot of click fraud. Competitors would realize that they could go online and just click a few times and wipe out their competitor's budget, and then therefore they would be the next one that would pop up. So that was the first problem with
Mm.
SEO. Google obviously implemented a lot of restrictions, and unless you were some evil genius with a warehouse full of people just clicking, you weren't going to be able to really engage in click fraud. Then it started going into words and optimization, and anytime someone would type in a word into Google, like best attorney in Charleston or best divorce lawyer, my website would need to have blogs or written form content that use that exact keyword in order for it to register and ding with Google. So Google was thinking, okay, this is a way to really make sure that the people that are showing up and are paying for these ads are actually real businesses that are actually offering the things that these people are searching. So that is where it really kind of stands now. Now you have all of these other search engines that are coming into play. Okay. You've got ChatGPT, you've got Claude, you've got Gemini, and people are no longer just putting in, like, show me some pretty pictures or something. They want to know specifically, who is the dentist that I can go to for a root canal? Who is going to give me the best Botox in town? And so, if you're not optimizing your website, your socials, and anything else that goes through that engine of searches for all of those different areas, you're losing people right off the bat. So, this is going to a lot of chaos with some business owners because some people are thinking, wait, wait, wait. I've just figured out the Google machine. I've got that working. And anybody that's put any significant amount of money into the Google search engine optimization knows that you don't want to mess with that too much, because the minute you start pulling money away or reallocating your budget, Google kind of like puts you in a timeout. And they're like, wait, 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 don't mess with that. But if you're not paying attention to those words, and I think what's happening with a lot of people is that we went from these SEO organizations that were getting hired by businesses just to make them pop up on Google, right? They didn't necessarily care about the aesthetics of it. If it even made sense when you were reading it, they just wanted those keywords so that Google would put it in where it needs to be on that first page. Well, if you're not actually looking at that site, tweaking it every single day, changing images, changing phrasing, adding Google reviews into like a header on the bottom of your site so that those keywords constantly pop, you're just wasting your money. So it's as important as ever, but you have to be diversified with it. You have to be intentional, and you really have to play with it a little bit more. You can't just give your money to Google and be like, I trust that you're going to, target who I need you to target. And not to, I could do a whole podcast on SEO, but you can get so much more specific with your audience. I can draw a geotag fence around Daniel Island and say that I want to target every person that lives there that makes more than $250,000 a year. And then they will see my divorce ad when they're looking, or searching anything for divorce. And then that targets over to Instagram, because Instagram knows that they search push that word. And it's just this all happy family that is like swimming together. So
Yeah.
it's something that's really important, but right now it's not being paid enough attention to in the aesthetic sense. They're just putting words up there, making sure that you're getting the hits you need. But then when the consumer looks at it, they're like, this doesn't read like the story I'm expecting.
Yeah, this is one of the main reasons I hired you. So, yeah, I cannot wait to get started on this, but it's so wild. And I think, in a way, and hearing you just explain this, searchability is more important than being followed. You have to be found first and then they can follow you, but just having that follower doesn't go anywhere.
Well, and I don't know how many times you've seen this happen, but it happens to me all the time where like I will see somebody pop up on my Instagram multiple times that I don't follow, but I've watched that video long enough that it now knows that I didn't hate that content. And now maybe the third time that I've seen somebody, I'm going to hit the follow button. But to circle back to your answer about followers, that's one of the biggest misconceptions. Like I have talent that have 20,000 followers and I can get them paid more than talent that has 200,000 followers sometimes. So I really don't want people to focus on that. Now, obviously, you do want to continue to grow your account and you want to make sure that, people aren't like leaving in droves every single time you post something, but that natural, slow, organic growth is so much more important than that fast, like, yeah, here, buy 100,000 followers and now you can get the deals. Brands know that. We put every single client through a software that goes through and knows how many fake followers you have, what your real engagement rate is, how many, like what demographics follow you, women, men, where they're located. So the day of kind of hacking that system is pretty much done. And I wouldn't even encourage people to think about it. Just post your content. Some people are going to unfollow, but more will follow and it will sort itself out. But do not make that. And I would also encourage you from hiring any marketing agency that promises you X number of followers because they're likely going to be using less than ideal ways to make that happen.
Yeah, that's interesting. What do you see talking let's bring it back about your to your legal side, which I think is your differentiating factor when it comes to marketing and branding and PR and representation. What do you think creative entrepreneurs are often giving away without even realizing it?
Well, I'm guilty of this too sometimes. The people that are so passionate about what we do, we talk about it all the time. And sometimes I'm guilty of, maybe giving away an idea that I should have held a little bit tighter and waited for them to pay me or, retain me. But I also believe in this like shared beautiful ecosystem. Like I was just having lunch the other day with this beautiful designer. She designed my house, but she also designed Marbled and Finn and she just got the contract to do the Four Seasons here. And just like us having lunch and these two entrepreneurs and meeting of the minds, and me saying, it would be so cool if you position that like this way. And just that is where my creativity, blossoms. And I get more ideas from pouring into other people and learning how their business works and how they are, putting their spin on things and what I can learn from them, how I can absorb from it. Because I mean, we're always learning. I tend to be a little too giving sometimes and a little too happy to share. But, no one's ever taken anything that was a proprietary idea. No one's ever, tried to hurt me in any way. So I'm going to continue to see that as just like a positive. And every time I share an idea with someone, either it gives me another one or, I get to watch it grow in them. And that's really fun too.
You're also giving a sneak peek into the value that you can add, right?
Right.
And it's always a fine line, and I do that myself sometimes with prospective clients. Sometimes I give away a little too much that really should be post-contract information, but you're sharing the value that you have to give. And I don't know, I there's no perfect formula.
There's not. And one client actually that was here last weekend, we were putting her contract together and she asked me something and I was like, man, that is just the best question to ask of your marketing team. And the question was like, we're going to be doing this big launch party for her in September. And she was like, if in a year after we've been working together and we're at a party for my, product, and someone asks you what you've accomplished for me in this year, what would you tell them? Like, what story would you share? What would be the things that you would be the most excited about, accomplishing? And I was like, wow, that is such a really good question. And it's hard. Like, I had to kind of think about it. And, maybe I don't have all of the answers yet because we literally just started working with her last week. But that's something that is going to be a driver in my head for future clients because I want to be able to tell them in a year, we're going to be talking about all of these things that I've been able to accomplish for you. And we're going to be on this whole other level. So you do have to like paint that story. They don't necessarily want to know every detail of how you're going to get there or every, linen you're going to pick or every, flower that's going, but they want to know how are they going to feel? How are you going to feel about it? And that's all it is. People want to feel good. They want to feel trust in where they're putting their resources. They want to feel
Trust.
understood. And if you can create that, that's more important than selling anything, I think.
Right. I think so much of what you're putting out there is building that trust so that the trust is established before they even make that initial call
Yes.
for your services.
And, just the same thing with you. Like somebody could take a deck that I've sent them and provide it to another marketing agency. I don't have any doubt in my mind that they're not going to produce it the way I would, and same with you. Someone could take your deck and give it to another planner. It's not going to be the same wedding or it's not going to be the same event. It's
Right.
just not. So there's
Right.
something in having that confidence and knowing, like, sure, you can take my ideas, but you're not going to execute them the way I would. And you're not going to deal with things as they come up the way that I would. So knowing that, I think, there's always going to be people. I know you've had staff in the past that have left and done something similar in the field. And in the legal world, there's no non-competes. We can't have them. So we're
Right.
kind of always dealing with, somebody popping up and either starting their own firm or wanting to do something similar. And I've always just had the attitude of like encouraging them to do that. And if they happen to have a skill set that's better than me and they're successful, then by all means, like I'm happy to hear it, but I'm also very confident in what I bring to the table and knowing that, no one is going to do it the way I do it. And that doesn't mean it's the best way.
And I would say too about, employees who come and move on and that's just the reality of life, right? People will come and they will go. It just comes down to will they do it with integrity or not? And you've experienced some things like that. And it's interesting because the under theme of what we've been talking about is trust, right? And so trust is clearly a fundamental, essential thing when you're running your business. And so when someone does something and steals something or acts outside of integrity, all the people are watching, right? And they can sense that.
No, you're
So,
so right, and, like, you and I both have never had to say a word about, anything about who those
yeah,
people were or how they were or anything like that because we have built our own reputation in town, and it's not even something we have to speak of, or nor would we ever,
mhm,
it's not something that we would get into, but I do think that that brings a whole 'nother, element to entrepreneurship, especially being females. My business coach says to me all the time, like, "What would a man do?" Because a man wouldn't care. He wouldn't, be interested in
right,
how you're feeling today or, if your dog died or, whatever's going on with you. And I think there's a beauty to being a woman and a female in power. And I also think that we bring, a softness to it. And does that lead us to be taken advantage of at times? Of course. Of course it does. But, I don't think either one of us would ever let that harden our hearts because we still get so much good out of like what we put back into the world. And those people learn, they learn that lesson the hard way. They learn it, in different situations. And, I'm sure when they think back on things, they wish they maybe could have done things differently. But that's part of life. Like we all make mistakes and things
yeah.
like that. But being the business owner and having to, deal with the personal heartbreak that happens sometimes because we do get very close to our employees, but still being able to deal with that with integrity and grace. And I think that's just so important because, everyone loves to tear women down and we just can't be adding to that in any way.
Oh, I could not agree more. I could not agree more. Um, Wrapping up our conversation, I want to hit 3 questions with you. And one is, if you had to give a creative entrepreneur one truth about building a brand that lasts, what would it be?
I would say don't be afraid to pivot. You're going to have a lot of ideas. Not all of them are going to be great. Don't be afraid to pivot and surround yourself with people that aren't afraid to tell you when it's a bad idea. Um, I think that's something that, I laugh at. I don't know if you ever saw that documentary that came out during COVID about the preacher woman and her hair was like this high. I always joke with my girls, I'm like, I'm never going to get too big to where y'all won't tell me when I just look absolutely ridiculous or when this is like a horrible idea. So I think being able to pivot is so crucial because things are not going to go your way every single time. An idea that you thought was amazing is going to fall apart. And so being able to like still have that innate faith in you and what you're putting out into the world and committing to it, no matter what form it inevitably takes, I think that's the most important thing to have.
I love it. What do you think the creator economy needs less of, and what do you think it needs more of?
So I think the creator economy needs less of the like I said, the brands that do the activations all at one time. I think the consumer is very aware, of what that is. And I think what they need more of is people that aren't really wanting to go viral. It's more of the inside behind the scenes of something that people want to know about. So, if you are an actor, we want to see how you read and prepare for an audition, or if you're a model, we want to see like, what is your workout routine? What's your skincare routine? So I think that's what we need to start seeing creators pivot to instead of just selling something. It needs to be more of like, what is your perspective that you're bringing to the world?
I think that's great. And this might be my favorite question of the day, but for the woman listening who knows she has something to build, but she's waiting for the perfect moment or for it to feel just right, what would you tell her?
It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to feel just right. It's going to scare the crap out of you. And when you get really terrified, that's usually when you know you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And, you can sit in comfort for as many years as you want, and this dream is still going to be there. So whether you act today or in 2 years, the only difference is the time that you're wasting in between. So I would suggest that you go for it. You'd be really surprised, not just at like the self fulfillment. Your children are so proud of you, your family's proud of you, you're proud of you and what you bring to your community. So just take the risk.
That's great. Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your talent. You are just amazing. And I'm grateful for your time today. Thank you so much.
So grateful for you, Reagan. Thank you for having me anytime.